So this is our annual edition related to the labor market. Traditionally, we invite our friends to discuss the trends and the changes that occurred in the last year. So our guest today is Jamal Elmidge from Malcolm Clay Search and Brian Lee from the Subgraph. I'm really excited to have you on to discuss the latest trends in AI. Of course, we see that AI is becoming more pervasive. It's touching more aspects of our life. So I'm really excited to discuss this today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jamal, it's great to have you back for round 2 of this. And Brian, excited to hear your thoughts on things as well. So let's just start off with what you both are seeing has already changed. There's tons of data out there around workers' core skills are expected to change pretty dramatically in the next year or so. There's also a stat that McKinsey put out that's up to 30% of current work hours could be automated by 2030 with AI. And we're already seeing some of that happen. So Jamal, over the past, year and a half, what do you think has fundamentally changed in how companies hire beyond just potentially fewer roles?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing now is, it's funny because I think some of this started a couple years back. So the preservation of capital. So what you're starting to see with the layoffs, some of that initially was around, hey, we need to find ways to preserve capital. But I think now with AI, there's the different trend. It's saying not just the preservation of capital, which tends to always lean back into headcount. So when you need to reduce, right, and figure out ways to cut capital or operating expenses, it's usually headcount. But AI now as a technology is really helping to shape that, because you can essentially do the task of 4 people now with 1 person. That's the human that's kind of providing the right prompts, setting up the right workflows to help to automate certain processes. And so I think that's been the biggest change, is really teams are now going from this mantra of, lean and mean because we had to do it to preserve capital. Now technology is kind of driving that, which in essence rolls into the preservation of capital as well. So there was a post from the Coinbase, right? They're laying off 700 people. And he said essentially the rollout behind that is we're going to now look for AI native talent. So you could have 1 person run engineering, run product design, and do product management. So that's the thought behind it. So once again, technology then drives the outcome.
That makes sense. Yeah, you're not lean anymore just because we need to save money. It's like you're lean because you should be able to be lean. It's a different connotation there. Brian, anything to add to that, or what you're seeing has already changed?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, right? I think even we can see I was interviewing for a recruiter on our team, and I spoke to a recruiter from Facebook. And typically the roles have been structured as you've got to sort through that finds candidates. You have a recruiter that manages them through the process. Now they're having recruiters be full cycle, and you're seeing like maybe they'll lay off the coordinating team, or they'll stop leveraging that coordination team and then let the recruiter just manage everything in it. Is how do we leverage AI to let our senior employees just be multiples better, as opposed do we hire somebody more junior to take a piece of that role? So I think it very much just piggybacks on what Jamal is saying.
Yeah, when it comes to trying to save money and kind of restructure how cost is associated with the business.
Yeah, a lot of my hires for early stage tech and from product to engineering roles, and I'm not seeing a ton of junior roles where typically maybe your senior engineer would kind of take a well scoped out ticket and kind of take the lead on that. Now you've got a senior lead that can, run a few different AI systems, and instead of needing to have the reps launch their own businesses, just because now you can have a chance to compete and carve out market space without building a massive team. So I hope it leads to more innovation and teams that can move more agile. And I think we're seeing that from the Blocks to Coinbases as well that are having the big layoffs.
Yeah, this is my number one question when it's well, let's just lay off all the junior people. Where do you continue to hire people in the future then? And so it'll be interesting. I don't think this is going to happen in the immediate near future, but I'm so curious if more companies will institute true training programs. And so are there some of that where they have to invest in up-leveling talent, or do they just expect it to go come from somewhere else? Jamal, anything else to add?
Yeah, SDRs. So once again, back to that entry-level salesperson, where you used to have these big floors of SDRs. I remember when I started at Palo Alto Networks, we were building out our Santa Clara office, our Plano, Texas office, literally scaled it from 50 to 150, SDRs. Now, there were different levels of those, but ultimately it was the same thought process, right? They were doing the outreach setting, appointment setting. Now with AI, you could use one person that's running specific automations, workflows, sequences, right, that are now helping to develop that pipeline that was initially created by an SDR. So those roles are starting, I think, in marketing. Some marketing roles are going to start to eventually move out just because we're a nation of prompters now, right? You can put in the right prompt and create the right messaging if you need. So I think that will be an area where we'll start to see some decline, parts of revenue, demand generation. And obviously, I think in revenue operations, you'll start.
And in just more entry-level roles, or in their companies are definitely not hiring for those. But when they are hiring for maybe more mid-level, senior-level roles, are they being more selective with who they hire? Like, what are kind of the skill sets that they're looking for people that are in the entry level?
I think everything will go back to, we're in a different age now where you can show your work, meaning you could build something, create it and say, hey, go to this website or create a Loom video. So I think that's where we are now. So I think from how companies are looking at candidates, it's like, show me what you can do versus, oh, well, I did it here and it's on my resume. Now it's like, okay, can you show me something you built? I mean, even for me personally now, everyone's joined the Claude train. I'm jumping on the Claude train, choo choo, right? Because you have to understand how it works and how it's going to make you more productive ultimately. So I think now that's kind of where we are. So as companies look to hire, it's what output can you give me right away, right? I don't know how much time I have to ramp you up. So if I'm going to spend the dollar to hire you, it's got to be a dollar that's now going to have a return.
And they want you to prove it in the interview process. That either you've done this before or you're going to do like an example of something in the interview process, what you're saying.
There was always the role play. Show me a discovery call. So now they're really, really going deeper into those discovery calls and saying beyond just that, right? How would you do it? Is there particular things you've created to make your life more efficient?
Even I have a client that's working on a product management role for their billing product, but it's very AI native, right? If you're not already building, and I think for more junior talent, like it still comes down to passion, right? Like I've always kind of gone back to, I used to work in an electric skateboard company, and to hire a new grad or an intern, like they need something that stands out. One kid was building an electric skateboard. He had already built something that he can go into this process in hand, where typically new grads and interns are like, hey, I did an internship, I worked on this here. But if you haven't built something and now have treats, you're behind the ball. And then if you're not bringing another level of passion, to learn new technologies, to figure things out, you're just behind the ball right now. There's a lot less room for somebody to come in and say like, hey, I work hard, teach me. Like you had to have already been working on this on your own time, or you're just behind the ball. Extremely competitive. I just saw, I think, ADP's labor report, and they're showing that like large companies are hiring a lot right now, and then small companies are. But like that mid-level Metas, the companies that have already seen success and that typically have brought in a lot of talent to tech, they're not doing that the same way. They're not moving engineers, scaling their teams up. They're actually we just saw with Coinbase, they're trying to get a bit leaner. So if you're not adding to that revenue and being able to make an impact.
Go build your own product. That might be the only way that you can have some like tangible proof that you can go and do something and launch something to get in the door. And hopefully universities will lean into that as well and help students, do some of that. We shall see. So, well, let's double click on the go-to-market side. I'll hand it off to him there.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation, and it's super timely. So many people are graduating and trying to find a job. What is it, May, right? It's a lot of graduations. Like, what do I do now? I know my daughter's looking at school. She's not there yet, but what kind of advice do you give kids, at this point, so that they can have some sort of future? And it's something that's on all of our minds. So I think this is super, super appropriate conversation. Double clicking on go-to-market, and maybe hopefully it's not negative or positive, but like opening up like people's opportunities in their minds around, hey, actually, this is what I need to do to be competitive. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit, Jamal, about that. One of the things we're seeing is that SaaS companies are definitely hiring fewer go-to-market reps per dollar of ARR, but then focusing on productivity, which is what you were alluding to earlier, right? Like, and that's kind of always been the case. Let's be as productive as possible. Let's be as lean as we can be. But now we're seeing that trend, actually, just become more prominent. So I'd like to understand, when it comes to go-to-market hires, are companies hiring fewer go-to-market people, or is it just different? Like, how are they thinking about this space specifically?
Yeah, I think I'll touch on one point you talked about the college grad, and then more recently. And also those that are going into internships. And the one thing that I talk to them a lot about is understanding how to network. I think that's going to be the biggest thing to help you as you exit out of college. Obviously, certain universities do a really good job of having alumnus that come in. And so there's different avenues you could take to start to network very early on. But if you're not from a big college, I just say in Harvard, right? Or USC, just because I went there. But in that sense, it's hard sometimes. And so the one thing I talked about is being intentional in terms of how you're networking, but also understand how to talk to adults. They don't typically do that. Everything's through text message, everything's through Snap or whatever. So it's really showing them like, just showing them how to have natural communication. Because I talk to not to go off track, but talk to my daughter a lot about that. Like, being able to have a conversation goes a long way, because that's what opens doors. And that's how it allows you to have interactions with humans. And sometimes I think they miss that simple step. And so I talk to them a lot about just that, right? Understanding how to have conversations, asking questions, getting more inquisitive around someone's background and what they're doing. So I think the more you could do that in terms of just building that whole person, then the technical side will fall into it. So as they're thinking about where they want to go into, if someone now says, hey, I want to be an SDR, right? My whole goal there is like, okay, you need to now understand the technical fluencies. I'm working with the founder right now that wants to hire a BDR. She's technology and how technology's probably helped them in some way. So being able to code and use different tools that are out there to help think about prospecting or talking or different types of, prospects. And then also the idea around sequencing as far as emails. So really someone that could think from a technology landscape versus just pure sales. She goes, I can teach them the sales aspect of it, but certain competencies that come along with, the job, the drive, the hustle, the inquisitive side of them, that's not always natural for some people. So someone that has that CS lens, but it maybe could index a little bit more on the sales side, tends to do really well in this particular market. So that's what I would say. If someone's wanting to break in, that's what I would advise.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Ron. No, Demetrius had to hear all about this the other day. So sorry to podcast listeners who listen to both episodes. But I went to a co-op school. I went to Northeastern. And so prior to graduating, I got a year of experience under my belt at a real company where I learned to talk to adults and how to interview and how to work with people. And so for people looking to go to school, it's like, think about who has co-op programs, who has internship opportunities, who really helps you get a year of experience on your resume. And that also helps with the networking side of things and just the business acumen as well. But I totally agree with you, Jamal.
Yeah, just
go ahead, Brian.
Add to that just really quickly is like, even that translate to the engineering side is like, yes, it seems like, some of the go-to-market roles are going away, but we're actually feel like we're seeing is a lot of that being used for engineering headcount. We're seeing go-to-market engineers, we're seeing forward deployed. It's just like you said, is they're leveraging engineers to have technical conversations and now forcing them to pick up those sales. So when we kind of ask what's going to happen is it seems like engineers taking over a sense is their sales role.
Yeah.
I'll say what's interesting to that point though, if you think about most of the products that people sell, they're technical. So there is a lens for someone that has that technical aptitude and drive to really work well there, because at some point they're going to talk to a peer way. So always good sellers had a good sales engineer. So now they're called solutions consultants or whatever, but really good solutions consultants, most of the time were really the one that drove the sale. And so what would happen is that's when the deal would actually happen. So most sales engineers would start to go, wait a minute, I'm the one doing all the heavy lifting here. And this guy's getting to go to, we go to President's Club together, but he's the one typically ringing the bell. So they started to switch over and realize wait a minute, there's actually a lot more upside in being able to use this skill set technically, understand how to sell, to kind of combine the two. And so I think that's where when I start to see really good technical people that let's face it, that can actually socialize, because some can. So when you talk about the networking aspect of it, they network. It's just more selective groups that they network in. They're not going to be at the social event, right, at the one crazy stuff, but they do network. It's just a different environment that they network in. So I think the more they could align that technical skill with other selling a technical product, or just a product in general that has a technical component, it's very easy for them to make that transition.
I think I would add to that. I think there's something to say about the peer-to-peer relation in that regard. But I think there's something deeper embedded in the technology that people start to sell. Traditionally, to me, there's probably a bunch of them that actually learn how to not be that person, but I'm not saying that's kind of the natural inclination coming from the background of these individuals, right? And also who they are. But here's what I think the AI changed substantially in that regard and accelerated the pace, is that the technology they're selling, it's talking to people. And a lot of that talk is that other trend that has been on the rise for a couple of years. That was reported by Gartner, right? And that trend continues to stay on the market. Now you matching this with the technology that can talk to you and respond and you can ask questions and, it gives you the answers. That's something that makes this pieces that I think a lot of companies, when they think about implementing Claude or implementing other technologies like that, they also look into some market, do a little bit of professional services or some kind of service that can adjust into kind of the expectation is that to me on behalf of that seller. So it's kind of a new thing that I'm observing. It's obviously my take. Observing engineers, they were adopting this technology, right? They love talking to technology by themselves instead of talking to people. And now they're using that technology to talk on, do the talk and do the work on behalf of them as they go and sell.
That's you got everybody silent after that one. That was awesome. Well, the mic was dropped before you started talking. So that's a great point. And it is a sign that of what technology is really doing. I do want to go back to kind of the go-to-market and the hires and who's actually being hired. There's a couple more questions I have. One is around, what does good look like, right? So, for SDRs, AEs, even in RevOps, like what is good, right? We do have the market flooded with folks who have either been impacted or even want to get into this space because I'm a little biased, but it's pretty interesting. So, yeah, what does good look like?
Yeah, it's funny because I think about how things evolve. So at one point, a good SDR I made 100 outbound calls, right? That was the thought. Now that's changed. A good SDR has built specific workflows, is using AI to automate certain processes, and is now actually generating revenue to a certain degree because now that pipeline is really true. So instead of the AE going, is this lead qualified? They're actually setting up really qualified meetings where there's already been, some of the discovery's already been done. So now you're turning over to an AE to really now add more around the discovery, peel back the onion a little bit more to get it closer to actually a sale. That's the difference. From the AE perspective, what good used to look like goes back to what I said earlier, where a good AE had a good technical aptitude, where they could run that first second call before they brought in a solutions consultant or sales engineer. Now you have to do that. That's not part of, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's something that you almost need to have, is to be able to use AI and leverage it to understand your customer, understand the ecosystem around your customer. So going much deeper is what a good AE does now. So instead of having 40 accounts, like, give me 10 great accounts that I can now dig into and expand beyond that initial one sale, but could go to 10 sales, different multiples in terms of the sales aspect of it. From a revenue operations side, a good RevOps person in the past was someone that could do great with spreadsheets. They were a spreadsheet wizard. Dee's looking at me crazy here because this is his realm, but that's what they were. Right? They could run that really well, that playbook. Now it's about, how do you orchestrate and put all these different pieces together? Using AI to influence those outcomes. So I think that's what good now is, really, how do you leverage technology? I mean, Brian talked about it earlier as recruiters, even for us, it's how do we think smarter? How do we leverage it to take away certain tasks? I fancied myself as the best at mapping. It took a long time to do it. Now I could leverage AI to say, this particular company, who are their competitors? Who are the competitors of those competitors? I could now go 4 or 5 levels deeper because of the use of technology. So I think that's how we all have to think about it is, I mean, they even said, I think 8% of job postings now have AI as a technical, AI technical fluency. So what good looks like now is more productive for the company. So everything's about the dollar. Ultimately, you hire Ron, how much, revenue can you produce for us, right?
Can I ask maybe a bold question? Do you think we'll
No.
Do you think we'll need SDRs and AEs in the future? Like, really what you're talking about is a lot of it could be automated. So why not just have the solutions consultant carry it along?
You'll do parts of that, but at the end of so if you think about it, the solutions consultant is still a human.
Yes.
So you're still going to need the human element. They're still going to need someone to have this conversation. As much as we could do the automation on the email, at some point, Brian and I, we have to get on the phone or a Zoom and talk to a candidate to get to know their background. Talk to the founders that we work with at the clients we have. So I don't know go away, and I'll even bring it to the HR side or recruiting side. When a lot of technology came out, I remember being on calls 2 years ago where it was like, "Our job is over with. We're going away." I'm like, "We'll never go away," because at some point, yes, they could run the first interview with an AI agent, sure, but interview number 2, 3, 4, where they have to prove certain things out, you could maybe try to automate that. But then where's the human element, right? A lot of companies talk about the culture that they're building and this that they're building. The more you get away from human interaction, the less culture you're actually building. And now it's just robots. And I think some people would think we could go that way. I just don't think ultimately you're still going to need an SDR to help with some of the, okay, this prospect has sent a message inbound. Do we want to now throw that over to the AE, or do we want our team of 4 versus the team of 50 SDRs to handle those types of inbounds? Sure, you want to do that. Or there's specific campaigns that, hey, our team of 4 SDRs can run now versus our team of 50. So I still think there's going to be a use case for them. It's just not going to be the big, robust teams
that makes sense. And all their skills are just going to have to be up level. They're a little bit like lower in the funnel now in terms of what they're doing. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. Some of the stuff, sure, you could automate. And now there's got to be a catch for the automation part of it. It's just not going to go to another automation to another automation. There has to be a human in there at some point to then put the human element to it and now make it part of what the company is.
It does lead you, I think it's a great question though. It leads you to wonder, like, what are those roles, right? Maybe it's a different name, right? Or we're further, down the funnel, as you kind of said. So, the more you went from 50 to 4, what stops you from going to 4 to 0 for that? But, there's still a human element. It's just later in the process, right?
It could be. Everything goes through iterations, man. We do. We go through cycles where there's ups and downs. At some point, there's always a way to get back to a normal. We just don't know what the new normal is yet. Because if we think about it, if we go back to the simple principle why I think there's a lot of layoffs still, capital is still in flux. We don't know what to expect. I mean, I'll just keep it at that. So we don't know. But I think to some degree, there is a sense that, hey, we need to cut things back before we can start to build forward. And if we're going to use technology for some of that, great. In the meantime, but at some point, I think there will be this idea of we're going to need a Ron. We're going to need a Brian, to come in and help us at that point, if that's the case.
A quick question for you, Jamal. Since you have a crystal ball somewhere,
I got a crystal ball head, but I don't have a crystal ball.
It's been a while. Sounds like this is a race to the bottom, right? Right. We say
Someone said that.
Yeah, where the buck stops here? Like, is this more of the, hey, we're going to benchmark that against the company that has 50 employees, and we're going to have a gazillion of companies with 50 employees? Is that the model going forward? Is that how we could find the bottom? Or this is going somewhere else for a while until the companies will realize, okay, if that is not going to happen, why we go back to the old model because we have to expand, and we're going to expand at the cost of our operating profit. because we're going to hire more people. So yeah, the bottom is going to eat the bottom line of the P&L, right?
The Coke Pepsi debate. There's some people that love Coke, some people love Pepsi. Different philosophies, different companies. There isn't a one size fits all. That won't work. So to your point, I think there could be the race to the bottom for some, whereas others might see it differently based on their company, what they're doing and what they're producing. But we need to lay off new administration, so different thought process around certain things. I think just give it time and we'll figure out what's what. But I think different companies will have different ideas on how they want to build their teams, architect things in general. Some will say we need to go leaner, where some might say we probably need to kind of stay at a higher level. So that's how I would look at it. It's kind of a more of a one-off versus this universal thought.
Yeah, I want to
everyone's
piggyback
gonna
off
do
of that. And like, even we're seeing that, right? If you compare search firms, right, you have a Riviera or a Quantum, right? Like where Quantum's crushing at Riviera. Now they're still trying to think about how they leverage AI to help their customers. But you can also be a small, nimble search firm and still do some of the similar volume. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to your relationships with customers, right? Like, can you find customers? Can you convince a customer that you can solve their problem? At the end of the day, I think some more service businesses that look like software businesses, because at the end of the day, it's really, how do you solve a problem? AI is another solution for these ways to solve problems. If you look at Subgraph, you're not going to understand how we're leveraging AI. The biggest thing is, how do we make hires for it? So I think it still goes back to, there's a lot of ways to solve problems. You can leverage AI, you could not. I think that we're going to see more opportunity for a 5-person company to generate $100 million in business. But I don't think, like Jamal said, I don't think it's an either or. I don't think it needs to be a perfect way. I think it really depends on how you want to build your business.
Yeah, no, that was so true, and I think it was a great question. It's a good segue. But before I hand it over to Dimitri, I do want to ask one more question, Jamal, because I feel like the audience would want to just understand, like, how do I get an interview, right? Like, okay, this is all great, this is amazing, but there's 1,000 applicants, and ultimately, I still want to land a role in go-to-market. So how do I do it? So, what are candidates doing to get the interview? Is there something that's differentiating them? Yeah. How would you help those folks out?
Let's say stop applying. I hate to say that, but it's tough, because the post on LinkedIn, just to see what kind of applicants we could draw, literally within an hour, we had close to 300 people that had already applied. Of those 300, I started to funnel through that. Just to make it quick, from that 300, there were literally about 10 that were worth a conversation. And there were 5 that actually moved into some type of an interview format. One of them actually got hired, but I'm just saying the numbers that you have to take the time to want to do it. And I know people say, oh, you're using AI to automate some of that. And that's true. So companies will use that to go, we'll create a specific scorecard. If you match these particular things, then you'll get a chance to maybe even do an interview with our AI bot. And then from there, if we score well enough, then you actually get to talk to a human. So there are companies that are developing technologies to help speed up some of that particular process. So one, I would say applying is going to be tough. Best thing is always leveraging your network as best you can. But beyond that is, once again, creating, right? If you can create a Loom video for a seller that says, hey, this is the products I sold, here's what I was able to execute on. So things that I can show someone very quickly, that shows that I can stand out. That's intention. When you do something like that, the average person may not even use Loom to begin with. But 2, the fact that you went and did that, you're actually putting a person now to actual LinkedIn profile or a resume, which separates most people, because once again, as recruiters, we get on with people and we need to identify that. We have to go through all that. And by that, we then meet with them. Then we share that information with the company. Now, if you can do that up front, where you're like literally a direct email to hiring manager, especially in sales, that shows in RevOps, something similar. If you were to say, hey, here's reports. So anything that could show productivity, right? Because once again, we're talking about that headcount being attached to $1. So if they can see right away, man, that's a return on our investment right there. That's what would help you stick out. Now, that's going above and beyond, but anything below that, I would say really leveraging your network as best you can. having people help to make at least that introduction, anything that could help you to get in front of a very long line is what's going to be most important. So I think that's how you do it in this particular market. You have to find ways to stand out, things that are different. I remember a young lady that we worked with was an SDR. She started doing videos long before it was really Loom, a long time ago. She always get the most literally callbacks all the time because she did something different in terms of how she positioned the product and her way in terms of how she would talk about how she would help. And so anything that you can do as people, right, to help us differentiate ourselves. Brian and I talk about a lot with the search firms. What can you do that makes you different than other search firms? Whether that's finding a specific niche, like, hey, I only focus here. So when I do searches here, I already have candidates already lined up because we just came off a search like that. So I just think things that can obviously make differentiators for ourselves is always going to be best.
So that makes me think about this like almost applying for a college, right? You're always trying to look better than the other applicants, right? And the same is here. You finish, you're done with the college, but you still need to do the same thing once again, whether on the job market. And also, I think what it really is doing, it actually increases the competition, right? It's like you have to be super, super creative to get a job because that creativity will define probably your performance once you get that job. And people want that. As we talk about the sales jobs here, not a lot of people really connecting sales jobs with creativity. They're connecting with a lot of other qualities, but creativity is actually at the core of sales job. And we just don't connect those things, but that's the fact. So yeah, if you're looking for a job in sales, yeah, looking for creative way to present yourself better than the others is probably the way. Let's start talking about the technical hiring trends. A couple of things I want to call out here before I ask the question. And the first one is, I think there's a significant shift year over year in the one area. This year, we started to see the kind of reporting about over 90% of developers.
We actually went through this exercise internally, right? Is like, I'm constantly trying to keep a pulse on my CTO. Do we need to add more engineering firepower? And every 3 to 6 months as we start to scale, I'm like, hey, like we're busy. Do we need to hire more engineers? And he's like, Claude's getting better. Cursor's getting better. GitHub Copilot's getting better. And his ability to be able to now like orchestrate like multiple systems scaling at one time is unreal. I'd say like a year ago, as we were building Subgraph, he'd say, all right, Brian, I need a month or 2 months to build this. But now it's like, all right, I'll have this done in a day, or in 2 hours later, I'm done. I think we're seeing more of these product engineers. Like, how can you now interface with customers and understand what they need to be built and then translate that versus typically you'd have a full team of backend engineers, front-end engineers, full stack engineers, and you all work together to build systems. But now they're like we can have one full stack engineer that understands the whole stack. I think the way to steer away from being commoditized is having product sense and having product taste, right? I think 10 years ago, I've been a backend engineering recruiter my whole career, backend, machine learning, DevOps, SRE. I love this space. My thought was like backend systems will always be here. And I still get those roles. I still have some backend searches. I have like infrastructure and DevOps searches. Even my backend searches, I have a client that just said, she messaged me, I need a product engineer. And I looked at the job title and it's a backend engineer. But now what they're asking for is a backend engineer that can talk to customers, that can meet with clients and now turn that into a product. You can't just sit behind it, say, all right, I'm going to code with my headphones on for 10 hours. And I think the way that you get yourself a steer away and stay ahead is my CTO was in a sales call this morning. He's Brian, like, I know that you pitch to all of our customers, but let me work on that. Because also what it does is that it gives him the ability to like really start to understand their pain. Like see the flows that it takes to see the rest of the business. I think you really do have to like, if you want to be at early stage companies, if you want to be at a growing tech company, like you do have to make sure that you're ironing out those product chops. And that's why I think it still goes back to build something. Like years ago, you could possibly join a Microsoft if you didn't have that experience. But even now, it's like to get into a Microsoft or an Amazon or an early stage startup, like you really have to stand out. And even the middle layers of the metas, and like we're seeing the mass layoffs. So it's like the opportunities aren't there. Still goes back to Jamal. You need to network. You need to make sure that like you're building great communication skills. I think the rest, like being well-rounded becomes more important than just being the best lead code problem solver.
Would you agree that we're actually moving into more like a generalist role than a specialist role, like only highly specialized, because the AI is actually giving us the ability to cover a lot of that with a degree of not screwing up things, right? I almost feel if you ask me any question, I can use the tool and fill the blank page very quickly. So maybe I'm not an expert in this, but I won't sound like a dummy.
Yep. And I actually have 2 executive assistants at customers that I support that have computer science degrees. I think that's showing you, right? Is like, even as you see a talent engineering job posting, I was considering hiring a recruiter for my team, and I was like, can I find somebody with a data analyst or a CS background that thinks in systems? So I think we are starting to see, like, it's a generalist, but we also want generalists with technical background.
Got it. I called this out at the beginning of my intro, is that we have a significant shift in the gap between the junior and senior engineers. Do you see that there's anything on the market? First of all, is that a trend, or could that continues this year? And if you expecting this to continue beyond? And then the second question on this I have is that what the individuals that are junior developers could do to catch up with those senior individuals, right? Because that's the problem. If the gap is growing, you have a higher population of individuals that are in a disadvantageous position. So what these individuals could do to catch up with those senior and actually be competitive.
I actually think it's an opportunity, right? I think the engineers now that don't have maybe there's senior engineers that are taking on the meaty technical problems, but the junior engineers I'm seeing at startups are now taking on recruiting. They're starting to work with sales and become go-to-market engineers. I think it's awesome. It actually gives you availability to now start poking into other organizations and say, hey, what are you building and how can we automate your systems? Even if you look at the recruiting workflow, there's been so much in our day-to-day that I'm like, why isn't this automated? Why do I have to go back and reschedule every call? Why do and then now when you have that's the difference in my business, is that I have a CTO looking over my shoulder and saying, oh, we can automate that. I sent a bill to a customer and I was like, how do I automate this? Just options like that. I think it just gives the opportunity for engineers to learn how to build businesses. And I think you have to take advantage. So I think it's less of oh man, it sucks that you can't do this. I think it's more like, hey, actually now you have the opportunity to learn how to build a business and not just focus on the code. And if you can take advantage and merge that, like you can build a $10 million company by yourself. That's not a bad thing. I think it's just those that see it as oh man, I don't have somebody that's going to handhold me to do this. But I honestly just think that's how tech is shaping out, right? Is that 5 years ago, we saw Meta and some of the big tech companies pull a bunch of people that didn't have true passion about being in startups or tech. And I think those people are now going back to other industries. They're going into health. They're going into education, and education and health are booming. They're massively growing industries, but I think it's really showing that tech isn't for everybody. Working at a 5-person startup, working at a Google is not a job that everybody can fall into. If you're not a top performer at your school and high school and then college, right? It is tough. It's one of the most competitive markets. I've been seeing engineering leaders post that we got 30,000 applicants for this role. It's supposed to be competitive. You get some of the most opportunity for equity. It's supposed to be a competition. I think people have looked at tech as, oh man, like, why am I not getting in the NBA? And it's because there's only 500 jobs in the NBA. And that's how tech is. If you're not the best of the best in this space, it's got to be really hard. But there's a lot of opportunity now you don't have to just go to Google. There's startups that are building in the search space. Can you plug into some APIs and build your own search product, right? There's a lot of opportunity to build on your own. So I think it's just taking advantage of that.
Okay, so sounds like we have a few things on the new frontier for engineers that there's the skills they need to acquire, right? They need to be good with the interpersonal skills that we called out when Jamal and we were discussing the go-to-market and other trends. Sounds like this individual also needs to learn more about the business and how to run the business. That's always good to have. We knew that before, but probably now it's just becoming more accentuated. It's actually becoming more and kind of demand for these roles. Is there anything technical that the individuals should do in order to be the high demand? Because I feel like even though you're going to start moving towards these soft skills, you still need to be good with the technical stuff, right? You need to have something that you can offer, with your skills range that is looking appealing to the individuals that will bring you on. So what is actually the high demand at this point in terms of the technical skills?
I've got a 2-year-old, and for us, it's reading and doing puzzles, because I think problem solving and communications are going to be the gold no matter what, right? And I think we're seeing that is that even for the most AI-driven companies, they're still asked to solve data structures and algorithms or elite code problems. You still have to be an elite problem solver, but you also have to be able to communicate that, right? You're not seeing engineers handed a coding problem and just saying, all right, go and disappear and do it. Now I have a customer that's, hey, your interview process is to build something, demo it with us, and then walk us through your decisions that were made and how you'd implement this. So now a lot of companies want to see how you problem solve on the fly, how you communicate that to others. I think that gets magnified in this. And I think it's a good thing that we still kind of go back to a generalist profile, but only the most elite problem solvers are going to get the opportunity, or build your own thing. And the access and the opportunity you have to compete with some of these others is there, because there's the APIs for everything.
That is true. So let's move to the next part, like how the actually organizations inside and how the work and collaboration between the teams is being structured, right? So the 60% of leaders say productivity pressure has increased while teams have shrunk, right? That's coming from the Microsoft specifically. Employees are interrupted on average every 2 minutes during the workday. That's another one from Microsoft. And Asana is reporting over 70% of time at work is spent on work about work rather than skilled labor, right?
Turn to office. We got to
Is
return to
that
office,
new?
though,
That
Demetrius.
can't be new.
I think
That's
it's
hilarious.
so I think the question is how the AI will change those trends, how you see organizations actually leverage AI to optimize it.
I think everything is a productivity thing, right? At the end of the day, everything's built around productivity. So I think AI is helping to provide that productivity. What you're really talking about is the human aspect, that you're talking about being bugged or someone coming into your cube or talking about certain things. I think those are things that's just office stuff. So I think productivity wise, AI is going to help to increase that, no doubt, just because we talked about it. You could take these big labor or manual processes, shrink that down with AI, and spit something out right away. 2 months ago, I couldn't develop a website. I can do a prompt now and I can develop a website. So productivity is always, I think it's going to help us in that regard. I think what tends to disrupt things is because I can now have someone build my website, I can now think about other things that ultimately might distract me from the main thing. And so the main thing doesn't become the main thing in a weird way in that sense. So I think underlying tone there that I got from that message is it's the interruptions between humans that happen versus how the technology has now made that, that's the best way to say it, a bad thing. Technology has made productivity easier. So I think sometimes humans are like, let me just hit this button, now I can go do something else. Versus in the past where you had to be honed in on that. You had to be focused on what the task was to get it completed, because you had to then turn that in. So that would be my take on it. Ryan, please.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see, like, one is like productivity is your product manager, right? And then it still goes back to now we're seeing engineers being turned into product engineers, because you got to keep the main thing, right? How do we move the product forward? How do we move revenue forward? So that's going to continue to be the focus. I think that at later stage companies, you have a product manager that can keep everybody on the same page. At early stage companies, you don't, and that falls towards your engineering organization or leadership. I think what we all battle is like Slack is constantly messaging us, LinkedIn, or we're getting emails, right? I think that those distractions, your coworker asking a question is always going to be a thing. And I think how do you really find those like 1 or 2 hours to really zone in and get your work done? I think that's why we've seen such like excitement for the remote opportunities, but I still think that collaboration is needed. While I love remote work, I missed an opportunity to just look over to my CTO and say, hey, can we quickly do this? But then now I pull him out of his productivity. So I think that's going to be the age-old problem with AI. With AI slop was the most searched term or something last year, the big word. And I think that we're still in an area of that, right? Is that yes, you can use AI to bring you more deals, but now are you interacting with more deals you should never have interacted with in the first place, and they're not quality, right? So it's a little bit of mixture of both. I think like we're still so early in this that like we're just doing everything. But like at the end of the day, and that's what I always go back to is, yes, we've built a system that helps us be more efficient, and maybe we can reach out to more candidates. Maybe I can talk to more people. Am I making more hires? And that's why I always go back to how many hires are we making a month? Because for us, am I as productive? Am I 2 times more productive? I think that's our final number though. And how I'm looking at it is if I'm not more productive, then all this AI was for nothing. But there's also the side of, yeah, but I also didn't have to do this. Maybe we've automated business development and maybe it's 70% as good. But from a small business owner, 70% as good could be worth it when you didn't have to do it.
That makes sense. I have a dream vision that a lot of Slack messages will go away because of AI. Because I think half the time someone slacking you is like, hey, I'm in partnerships. What do we do with this partner? It's, oh my God, this information exists so many places. And tools like Glean or other things can hopefully be, you can be like, hey, why don't you go ask this AI Copilot we have to go get that information? But then other questions will come. It's always going to be something. I agree with you there. I think you both have talked about like how roles are changing on the go-to-market side and then on the more technical side with product engineers, with more technical sellers. You seeing any new roles emerge, more cross-functional roles emerge between go-to-market and technical teams that you're finding interesting?
I think Palantir started it with the forward deployed engineering role, where their thought is like, hey, we're going to have engineers and teams just go completely into your organization and now understand what their pain points are and work with them to build something. As opposed to typically it was a solutions architect that may work with some of the customers, but like they weren't on site, they weren't building the product. And now it's, no, just go build it for them. And it's still the software as a service business where essentially like this is a design firm or an engineering firm that's now building the product for you. So I think that's what we're going to see is like this explosion of, you can see with my CTO, can I be on sales calls? Now he's building out some of our marketing tooling, right? Is like, how do I now start to understand the rest of the business? Because that's what this future of engineering is. You can see engineers starting to take over more of the recruiting tasks, the sales tasks. I think it all just means engineers are going to, AI is not the engineer's world. But I love that, right? It's because if you think about the core of what an engineer is a builder, is that now we're putting more power into builders' hands versus like those that are in support function. So yeah, I love it. I want to be on offense. I'm a great defender, but offense builds businesses.
And I think that's a great example. We've talked a lot about more of the IC individual contributor roles. How are trends and things changing for leaders? What do they need to be better at in terms of what they're focused on? And then what are companies looking for in leaders?
We're not seeing like a ton of levels. There's no engineering manager, senior engineering manager, engineering director, unless you're at like 1,000+ company. I was actually just chatting with the VP of product and like, even they're starting to decompress layers. It'll go from like VP of product to like senior product manager to an IC team. So there's like, they're actually trying to get rid of managers and then now just have like a lead that builds. I'm working on a CTO search that it's titled their head builder. So I think you have to move back more on more hands-on. I think we're seeing a lot less of like people that are like, well, I think it's going to be an interesting market for those that just manage people. If you're like, man, I just got out of 10 today, I think there might, depending on the company, you're probably going to see layoffs from organizations like that.
Same thing on the go-to-market side, Jamal?
I would say what's starting to surface in some aspects is the fractional leader that just comes in, was an expert at a specific thing. They're deployed in for that 20 hours a week, get to where it needs to be, and then they just parachute out. Things going, yeah, I think that'll happen, which I think could in a weird way have an effect on executive search, because I don't think we're going to have these big bloated teams anymore where you have all these different VP levels. To Brian's point, I think some of the larger companies, that's always going to be a case. But as companies where we tend to swim in that lane, that early stage startup lane, I think it'll be more of the fractional leadership to come in to help out initially before they get to a place where we need to have that person there day to day. because once again, it's a cost saver at that point. It's an operating expense that you don't have to really incur from the recruiting standpoint to do executive search to find that person, especially in marketing. That's one of those areas where CMOs, I thought it was interesting when I had to do a CMO search once, how quickly they
So
rotate
quick.
out of companies. Like in sales, you want to see a seller in place for at least 2+ years because it takes that long to build a territory out. CMOs, they come in and there's always say the same thing. I was promised it was going to be this and it turned out to be that. I'm like, does that happen all the time? So maybe you need to do a better job up in the upfront interview and making sure that this is what it is. But I would say less price CMO type opportunities where you'll just bring in someone that's done it to a certain point,
Yeah.
get you to where you need to
That
be.
makes
Yeah, I
total
have to
sense.
say, I have to defend some of the CMOs on that front. They often promise things because people don't understand the marketing well. And often they just don't speak the same language during the interview. So they ending up, hey, yeah, it's going to be like this. But then, oh, I didn't know it's going to work like this. So I think it applies to every job. When people repeatedly have the same problem, yeah, there's probably not a problem with every single company you are in. And,
I think the one role that may still be that people, and it's weird to think this, but I don't really see too much of a change in the CRO role right now. Not yet. I think there's still that layer where they're still the general telling the troops where to go, so to speak. I haven't seen as big of a shift there as I have with some of the other lower level sales roles. And then
I think
in
it's
market.
because of the pedigree and the background of these individuals in a lot of cases. I guess most of them, they're coming from the sales background. To good at,
Yeah.
but yeah, not every CRO has to be a former sales. But I think there's something to say about the kind of the nature of the job as well. I think you really lead the organization that has this first touch, first impression. So you want to definitely put more emphasis on it.
We're actually running a search for a company that's addressing that specific issue. So in the past in sales, you ran the A/B test. So you had to send out the A/B test, A test first, wait 3 or 4 months for it to come back. Was there ROI? Okay, it wasn't. Then we shift to B. This company now is able to do that within a matter of months, if you will. So they can send out A, get the feedback from A. Okay, that didn't work, and shift to B. Now we can figure out between the two what worked, what didn't work, and now we have campaign C
more
that you can now
predictive.
send out. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
even that,
Yeah. And the testing,
Exactly.
to your point, Jamal, not always look good. It looks good in the spreadsheets, right? Yeah, you're still running a spreadsheet, AI or not, still having a spreadsheet.
Let's switch a little bit into some advice before we wrap things up. As we've mentioned quite a bit, there's been a lot of layoffs over the past year or so. So not what's something
It's such a positive note. Layoffs. Let's start there.
It's true though. I think so many people have been
Yeah.
impacted that maybe have never been impacted by layoffs before. So what's one thing besides stop applying to a million jobs, which I already heard, that people who have been laid off should stop doing in their job search?
I know the answer.
What's your thought, Demetrius?
I think you should stop applying on the job board.
I
Stop.
already said that.
Stop applying. Stop doing
she said,
stop doing anything that majority of people doing, and definitely build a relationship with the people and that are working at the companies that you want to work for. That would be my guess.
Yeah. I go through this conversation with new grads, my brothers, just a few years out of college. So we talk through this a bunch. I tell them, like, you got to dive deeper into your passion, like, what are you so passionate about that nobody else is, right? Like, I was selling shoes and fake chains and copied CDs when I was in middle school, I've been selling my whole life. I've been passionate about basketball. I've been passionate about technology, like, what do you do when nobody's paying you to do that? And like, now how do you start to interact with the people that do that at high levels? It's not just like, okay, Airbnb is a cool looking company. I want to work for them. I'm going to go message them. Like, find something that aligns with something that like really, really wakes you up in the morning and drives you to solve problems. And then start reaching out to mentors. Say, hey, like, I don't message people and say like, hey, can I get a job? I message them and say, hey, you have an awesome career path. Like, can you talk to me about how I get there? Like, what are some of the learnings you took along the way? What are you passionate about? Like, what advice do you have? And then I think now the next time that person's hiring, they're like, oh, wait, what about that kid that hit me up that's already building this, that's so passionate? now I have a new grad role pop up. I'm going to reach out to them.
Yep.
Because I think everybody wants to hire somebody they trust and they know that like is really, really excited for their space. You can't, it's really hard to understand that in a job description, and then translate that into a resume. And I feel like because like LinkedIn's easy apply, it's just getting flooded, right? Like Jamal talked about it. Anytime you post a job, you're going to get, I could post an engineering role and I could get 10 truck drivers. And the time it takes to have to filter through that. But if I talked to somebody a few months ago that's like, hey, Brian, I saw you worked with, a computer vision company. I'm passionate about computer vision being applied to sports. If you ever run across something, what would founders want to hear about? Like that's somebody that I remember. So I still think it goes back to like, how do you prove that you're more passionate about this than anybody else? Because if you're not, it's very competitive. You got to find something else.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point earlier too. Like, Airbnb, Google, all these big companies use AI to go find the smaller companies that are doing a similar thing.
Yep.
Like, there are so many tiny companies that probably need help in many areas that you could help out, even if it's fractional, to get the experience and parlay that into something else.
Yep.
People are fearful of startups though, right? Because they think, oh my God, what if the company fails?
You could
And I'm
be
like, are
laid
you
off
looking
in
at
no time.
companies that are laying off?
Yeah.
There is no, to me, to your point, get the skill set, right? Because you could always, for the most part, level up. Where it becomes hard is when we're reaching out to certain people. Can you now scale down to the startup?
And you
I
want
think
to
that's
fail.
a great point. Yeah. You're talking about, what I hear is, what do you do with that time you're not spending applying to all these jobs, right? And you just said it, right? There's information, there's knowledge out there to go get. There's people to go talk to, right? And so you're kind of stitching a lot of those things we've talked about before, right? That network, or you mentioned passion, which is, it totally makes sense if you're passionate about it. I love the way you described it though, which was, hey, are you doing this when no one's paying you, right? Now, unfortunately, sometimes not all passions will get paid ever, right? Like, so we do have to like balance that at some point, right? Because as much as I love basketball, at my age where I am, I'm not getting paid to do that. I'm gonna tell you right now. Like,
I got to pay to do it.
Right, but what you're saying, it totally makes sense. And we talked earlier mentioned my daughter was looking at schools, and I know Dimitri has the same situation. And what are you telling them, right? Is it passion? Sometimes I tell my girls, hey, there's you don't know if you're passionate about something until you actually start trying something, right? Sometimes, right? And then oh wow, I'm actually kind of good at this. So I'm good at pattern recognition and things like that. And then, then you can go and pursue it. It might be more general and then get more specific over time. But I love the way you describe that.
Yeah, and startups don't put you in a lane. I think if you
Yeah.
join a bigger company, you're doing one thing. If you're at a startup and you're like, you're really interested in something, most of the times the startup will be like, go do that. And that's a great opportunity.
Yeah. Also, I think it's a stage in your life where you should be trying things, right?
Before you have a mortgage and kids and a marriage and loans.
What else?
Oh, I'm not stressed at all. I'm not stressed at all. I now need to do puzzles for my 4-month-old. Nothing stressful.
Yeah. What's the health report? And I'm like, oh my God, now we're getting to 70. No, I think there's a right timing for trying things. And I think when you are in college, that's the right time, right? Try to build and just figure it out. And don't be afraid of this. So definitely it's a thing. Definitely different things happen later in life and you should totally adjust. But speaking about that period, definitely that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up to that is I think we look at these layoffs as like, it's like a bad thing. Somebody posted that like being laid off is like the best job to have right now. Is like now you actually have the space to look at how you can leverage the AI tools. And now often if you're getting laid off from Coinbase, you probably have a severance. You have 3 months to dive deeper into those passions and figure out what you want to do. So yes, it's a bummer to see the layoffs, but like it's also a new opportunity to crush. So I think, yes, you can take some risks when you're coming out of college, but this is probably the best time to try and start a company. There's more technology, there's more assistance. Like I asked ChatGPT and Claude like so many questions about just spinning up my business on like What decision should I make day to day? Look at some of our trends. What should I be focusing on? So like, yeah, I hear about the layoffs and I feel slightly bad for them because nobody should have to go through that. But I actually see it as an opportunity to find another lane to crush. I love it.
Yeah, and it's coming at a time right after a pandemic where I think everyone reevaluated what they wanted anyways, and maybe it's okay now, go do it.
I think work can help too, though, because I've been through a few. Being in the valley is just part of the nature of what's going to happen. But I think what it does is it gives you a diversified on things and companies. Hey, when I was at X company, we did this way when we had this situation, or this company when this happened. So it really lends itself for me to think about how I would work through certain obstacles or things because that's how we did it there. Not necessarily it's always the best practice, but at least gave me a framework to go, this is how we did that there. So when I went from Palo Alto Networks, grew up from 800 to 3,000, and then went to a 60-person startup, to your point, Lizzie, I had to do everything in recruiting, literally hire, do the coordination of the interview, get the candidate in, present the offer. Once they got hired, do the I-9, give them their laptop. And then when they wanted to do a university program, I'm like, I've never done that. But I knew people at Palo Alto Networks who had done that. So I just think sometimes if you look at it from a framework like, okay, what did I learn from that and how can I use it in my next opportunity? I think it can help. So to your point, Brian, it's just framing sometimes. Okay, this sucks now, but how do I leverage this for something
Start on a
better in the
negative
future?
and we ended on a positive. It's the best time to be laid off.
Is it time? Do you apply to those startups? Like, how do you get a hold of them? Right? Like based on our conversation. But no, it is right. It is a way to end on a positive for sure.
There's so many ways. Engage with their content, reach out to people at the company, give some advice if you're like ideas, if you have it. I think as building a startup, like when people engage with me, I'm all excited. As long as they're not trying to make me buy something. That's the one time that I'm like, please, we don't have any money.
I started Malcolm Clay Search after I got laid off from Sequoia Capital. So it's, I mean, it's weird in that way, but you have to sometimes think about it that way. Like I didn't necessarily want to go this route, having reflected on the network that I built while I was there, the name and the brand that Sequoia Capital carries, the people that I met throughout the whole process. So it's those things, right, that you take away from and go, okay, how do I now leverage that in a positive way where hopefully I can contribute to them as they contribute to me? So yeah, layoffs, but I do think to Brian's point, it's how you view it and then move forward from. It's unfortunate because I do know some people that are now almost into year one of being from a layoff. But I think for them, they're stuck in the way they do things. They haven't tried to move off that platform to think about different technologies or different avenues. Or I'd say, hey, have you leveraged your network? Oh, I didn't even think of that. And maybe sometimes they're just so used to operationally going, I applied to this job, I got that job. Versus now, there's a whole new mechanic that you have to use to get the job. And now you're talking about people that were laid off from the private sector, the public sector. So now you've bloated the competition even more. So I just think some people get stuck in this particular malaise where they're like, I don't know what to do next. And so to Brian's point, sometimes you got to just push. Luckily, that was my sister that said, you need to do this. So hopefully there's somebody like that that kind of gives you that push to go directly.
I hope that people who do this, they will just follow this advice and start doing the things differently. But I'll tell you this, I think everything goes back to how you perceive your role in your job. And, there's a couple of philosophies, but the way I would think about it is like nothing that you experience in the sense of guarantee of your role is true. And once you start realizing this, anything that's going to happen in your life, your career life, will have always more alternatives than that. So this is the advice that I'm giving anyone who has a corporate job and is afraid of losing the job, or they might be caught in the way, as it happened to a lot of us and a lot of our friends. And that will probably accelerate the process to getting into something that is more positive than dwelling on how you lost the job and how you get back on the same track, even though the conditions and the rules of the game changed substantially. So that would be my advice to anyone that is in that position.
I'll end with this too. I think your personal brand is so important. The valley's very small. LinkedIn has made a very big world very small. People do back channels. So it's important to make sure that your personal brand, your professional brand is respected and liked and admired in some ways, because it could easily take things the wrong way because, oh, I saw you were connected with this person here. And if someone says something negative, that could also spin you in a lot of different
I'll also
directions
add
too.
to
So
that though, is that I think
I would,
we've created failure to think like it's a bad thing. And with hiring managers that have been fired and then all of a sudden they pick up with the next great job. So it really doesn't travel with you that far. I tell people, like, even with the Coinbase layoffs, like if whatever is a failure, it's actually not. It's a learning lesson. And I think the more people can look at whether it's marketing or whatever their work is, even for me, right? I could reach out to 100 people and get 3 responses. And yes, I could say, hey, 97 of those messages were fails. But one is that it teaches me that, hey, maybe these people just aren't in the market or they're not. I learned something. I learned that they weren't interested in this job. So yeah, I think it's really like Dimitri touched on, it's how you position this. So that's why like I see the layoffs, but I'm also like, yeah, but if there's a chance that if you were laid off, like you were probably ready to leave anyway, and you just needed that push. So hopefully
Yeah.
that's the case and you're getting the push you need.
And there's
Yeah.
not the negative connotation for hiring managers. Like in 10, 12, 15 years ago, like I'd be like, oh, why were you laid off? Now I'm like, it's a dime a dozen on people getting laid off. I don't hold it
hasn't?
against anyone. Yeah.
Let me challenge this because I agree with you that wouldn't be something for me as a hiring manager to dwell too much, right, or too long. If I see someone is a great candidate, I almost don't care whether they will lay off or not. I know there's a lot of people out there that actually avoiding candidates that were laid off, and that's intentional. So the question for you, Jamal and Brian, do you see this to be a trend? Do you think that people still insist to have people that are actually having a job before you recommending them for roles, or how is this really being treated? Because, I mean, I've seen this before that the people that were laid off, they were stigmatized.
if we think about, when you think about layoffs, people make the association you're not a high performer because high performers don't get laid off. And I've got some that I work with that, even who's laid off or who's not currently employed, or you have to be employed at certain companies, people build certain profiles, right? To essentially keep people out. And so, or you're not from the right university. There's all different things that people will use to essentially weed people out of the process. And you just have to go with that. You're going to change their mind. That's how they see things. Top performers don't get laid off. Top performers aren't actively looking. So even if you see that in their LinkedIn profile, it's open for networking, they use different things. I don't know. That's just how some people think about it. Whereas others are like, bring it on. This person's going to have a specific desire or fire because they were laid off. They're going to want to work harder. I'm working with a mom that took time off from paternity leave. And so even having to navigate that landscape, right? She's in this position, like no one really wanted to reach out to me. I'm like, no, I thought your background was good. I think we just have to figure out a way to deliver and share your story so that others that are hiring see that there was this person before mom that was great at what she did. She just took time off to be with her child. So hiring's weird, man. I hate to say this, but there's some dumb people.
And this goes
They're
back,
just
I think,
hard.
to the networking. If you have a good network, you cut through all that because people know you. They're not looking at your resume. They're looking at the relationship they have with you, the work they've done with you before, whether it was in a company or at a different company too. All right, let's wrap things up with our rapid fire round. So what's one hiring trend people are overreacting to?
That essentially AI is going to take over everyone's job. We talked about that earlier. I just don't think that there's always going to be a need for humans to help to push the ball across the goal line, so to speak, right? If we want to continue on the sports analogy. So I just don't think that's something. I do think, once again, if you're not fluent in it, you will get left behind.
I think it's still the layoff noise. I think we've been seeing layoffs in our market, whether they're from Cisco or Microsoft for the last 20 years, they've just been quieter. Now I think you just have so much more of the market that's on LinkedIn paying attention to the news, and text it travels a little bit easier. But these layoffs have been happening. Companies have been trying to move slimmer forever. So I think the hype in layoffs is a big part of it. We've had more success hiring in the last 3 months than we've had in the last 4 years. So I actually think I'm seeing more hiring than I ever have, and the market seems hotter for great talent.
Yeah, like what are we underestimating in hiring trends?
How people still weren't great. Like it's just still so much about like great people get hired. If you're not, that's why I still go back to being passionate, right? Kevin Durant is still getting a job. If he moves in the Rockets next year, there's going to be 10 teams that are like, we still want great. So no matter what, like people want greatness. And I think some of us don't have an understanding of where we fall into the market. I think we all think we're amazing and we're all great at certain things. Maybe some people haven't really understood their passions, but you also have to accept that if you want to work in tech at one of the top startups, there's a very good chance there's somebody applying that's way better than you are.
You have to be a performer now, right? You have to show what you can do. I think the days of using the resume that I'm just going to leverage that are kind of gone. It's going to be more around the productivity. And to your point, you could have that on the resume, but when you get in the interview, they're going to really grill into how did you do that and go layers deep into how you did that versus just, oh, I crushed my quota. I love that one.
Right.
Okay. How did you crush your quota?
Right.
How many deals did it take to get there? When you came to the territory, it was at X. When you exited, what was that? So I think it's more around that. And I'll talk to candidates that have no clue. I'm like, but this is on your resume. So it's those things that I think we underestimate sometimes, is that people just want to use their resume to get the job. And it's beyond that now.
We've talked quite a bit about AI, but what's one human capability that still compounds?
Miles.
Man,
I love it.
oh, this is how you have to really cook the cake. Right. So I'm just, there's things where we still need the human element, right? You still need to be able to think. We're building these teams, but these teams are still people, whether it's 800 or 5, they're still people. I think, the more we understand that element of it, I think that's what get lost sometimes, is all this thing around productivity, but it's like, is it productivity at a cost sometimes, where the human now, as much as, you're leveraging them. I mean, the Coinbase guy saying, I'm gonna have one guy do three people's jobs. I get it, but I don't get it, like, in a sense, right? So I just think that makes more sense to me as like, okay, one person, how do you feel about that? Right.
And
so
salespeople still have to sell to humans, product people and engineers still have to build products for humans to use. For now, it may all be MCP interconnected at some point, but we're not there quite yet.